This happened when I was a kid, around 8 years old. My parents had me much later than my two older siblings, who are at least 10 years older than me. One night I woke up to a loud noise downstairs. It was my parents, and they were really upset about something. I didn't know what it was, so I went to the stairs and called out, "Mom, Dad." My mom came to the bottom of the stairs and told me to go back to bed. I did, without asking questions. I could tell they were worried, but I tried to go back to sleep. Then I heard the front door slam shut, and it was quiet. I thought they left, but I wasn't sure why. Later, I woke up again to the sound of the front door closing and footsteps, but no talking. I thought they were back home and being quiet so they wouldn't wake me up. I heard occasional footsteps and thuds from downstairs, like someone was opening and closing drawers and cabinets. I even thought I heard the fridge opening. I assumed it was my older brother Chris, who was 10 years older and often came home late. I told myself these were logical explanations for the noises. But then, I heard footsteps coming up the stairs, getting louder and closer, until they reached my door. The door slowly opened, and I lay still, looking at the doorway. It was dark, so all I saw was a black shape that looked like someone's head. I said, "Chris? Mom? Dad? Who's there?" But they didn't answer. They just closed the door, leaving me confused and a bit spooked. I heard footsteps going downstairs and thought it was my dad checking on me after coming home. But I wondered why he was ignoring me. After a while, I got curious and went downstairs in the dark without turning on any lights. As I approached the kitchen, I froze at the doorway and saw a tall figure standing in the middle of the room. I said, "Dad," thinking it was him because of the person's size. But a deep voice replied, "Go back upstairs." I quickly ran back up to my room, closed the door, and hid under the covers. I wondered why my dad's voice sounded so different. I didn't realize that a stranger was in the house until later, when I heard the front door open and more noise downstairs. I saw my parents again and asked what happened. They said Chris had a small accident but would be okay. Later, I found out he had a car accident while driving in bad conditions. My parents got a call from the hospital and rushed to see him, leaving me asleep. When I asked my dad if he came to my room, he said they were gone for hours. My mom got upset, yelling at my dad for not locking the door. When I told them about the person in my room and kitchen, my dad searched the house with his gun, and my mom called the police. I remember a police officer asking me to tell what happened. My parents felt embarrassed telling the police they left me alone and unlocked the door. Nothing valuable was stolen, but having a stranger in the house was already scary. Second story. Imagine going through that at 8 years old. This happened around 2013-2014 when my brother was 7 to 8 years old. We had just moved into a new house, which was nice, and even had a cozy fireplace. My brother loved Batman and had a favorite toy, a Batman car that made noises and lit up. One afternoon, he came inside and said he found something. It was a worn-out picture of a young boy, like a school photo tag. The picture was dirty and showed signs of wear. We found an old picture of a boy, but couldn't see the year it was taken. My brother said, "That's Buddy, my friend." I was confused because my brother didn't make friends easily, and I didn't know anyone named Buddy. I thought maybe he made friends with the neighbors and got the picture as a keepsake. One night, I woke up to my brother talking at 3 a.m. I went to his room to tell him to go back to sleep, but it was weird. He was sitting up straight, talking to someone, not just himself or his toys. I told him to go to bed. A couple of days later, my mom asked if I'd seen my brother getting up at night. I said no, but mentioned waking up to him talking a few nights ago. My mom said he'd been acting strange, but we both thought it was just him being a kid. In my room, my bed faced the door, so I could see into the hallway if I turned over. One night, I woke up to use the bathroom and left the hallway light on because I'm afraid of the dark. I was lying in bed, facing the door, waiting to fall asleep. I was startled by a sudden noise, which was just my brother's Batman toy making sounds. I got up to tell him to go to bed, but he was already asleep with the toy on the floor, still making noise. I turned it off and went back to sleep. But in the following days, my brother wouldn't stop talking about Buddy, which was starting to freak me out. I checked with our neighbors, but one house didn't have kids and the other was empty, which worried me. My dad thought it was just an imaginary friend, so I went along with that idea. But almost every night, one of us would hear my brother's toy would make noise, and I had to turn it off. I told my dad that I had to do it too, and mentioned again how my brother talked to someone at night. My dad thought the toy was motion activated, but we didn't see that feature when we bought it. My sister and I were really scared, so we started sleeping in my room together. We were trying to calm each other down when we heard the toy's noise again. We looked towards my open door and into my brother's room, which was right across from mine. My sister and I were horrified when we saw our brother's toy rolling past the door on its own. We screamed and ran to our parents' room, but they scolded our brother, thinking he played a cruel joke on us. But what he said next sent chills down my spine. It wasn't me. Buddy wanted to play that night. We trashed the toy, but the next day, my brother had it again. He claimed Buddy got it for me. The toy was broken into pieces and thrown away for good. My brother was upset, but our parents got him a new Batman figurine and everything seemed fine again. About a week later, we thought everything was back to normal and that Buddy was gone. My mom was cooking in the kitchen when she came into the living room to ask us something. Suddenly, we all jumped at the sound of a crash in the kitchen. We went in to see the George Foreman grill had been thrown across the room, even though my mom said it was nowhere near the edge. My dad had no explanation. Nothing else strange happened after that, and we moved out about a year later. But to this day, I wonder if my brother's imaginary friend Buddy was actually real. Third story. When I was 10, we moved to a new house in a different town. I had to start at a new elementary school as a 5th grader, which was tough. It was awkward at first because all the kids already knew each other, and I was the new kid. In elementary school, you had to sit with your classmates at lunch, and it was really awkward for me the first few days. Kids can be very judgmental at that age, and I was judged as the new kid, making it harder to make friends. But during those initial days, I met a few kids, including Dan, who went to a private school. So we went to different schools. I met Dan while biking down the street, and he asked if I had just moved into the house on the corner. We started hanging out, and a few days later I met Alex. Alex came to my door and asked my parents for me. I was confused, but my parents introduced us, and Alex said he lived down the block and wanted to know if I liked video games. I said yes, and he invited me to play Grand Theft Auto, San Andreas at his house. I didn't have the game, but I really wanted it, so I said yes. We walked to his house, which was literally the corner house at the opposite end of the block. I thought Alex's house looked less nice than the others on the block. It was the same size, but seemed run down and not well taken care of. The front yard had no grass, just dirt and a walkway. Inside, the house was messy and cluttered, like a hoarder's house, with boxes and junk everywhere. We went to the basement, which smelled like cats, but there were no pets. The basement was a mess, and we sat on a brown leather couch to play video games. We had fun playing Grand Theft Auto San Andreas, and I thought I might want to be friends with Alex. But after 2 hours, I wanted to go home, and Alex seemed disappointed. He walked with me halfway home until I said goodbye. I told Alex I had to go home, and he seemed disappointed. That was the first sign that something was off about Alex, but I didn't think much of it. The next day, Alex came over again, and we played video games in my room for an hour. To be honest, I was starting to think he was weird and made me uncomfortable because he stood too close to me. The day after that, Alex came over again, but I didn't feel like hanging out. So I told my mom to tell him I wasn't feeling well, and he left. I preferred hanging out with Dan, so I rode my bike to his house to see if he was free. We started riding our bikes further up the block, but that was a mistake because Alex saw us from his window and came outside. It was weird, especially since I had just told him I was sick. I told Dan about Alex, and Dan was shocked, saying that Alex's whole family was crazy. Dan also told me that Alex was a couple of years older than me. From then on, I decided to avoid Alex. The next weekend, Alex came to our door again, but I had already told my mom to say I wasn't home. However, that night, I woke up to find my window wide open and a cool breeze blowing in. It was a chilly September night, and I was sure I had closed my window. But when I woke up to a cool breeze, I realized someone had opened it. Then I felt something touch my foot, and I screamed. That's when I saw Alex at the foot of my bed. He told me to be quiet and said he had climbed through my window because his parents were fighting and he wanted to sleep with me. I was shocked and told him to leave, but he begged me to let him stay. I told him again to get out, and watching him climb back out of my window was disturbing. I locked the window and went straight to my parents to wake them up and tell them what happened. They couldn't believe it. The next day, my parents went to talk to Alex's parents, but it didn't go well. Alex's mom screamed and laughed at them, refusing to take responsibility for her son's actions. I think my parents didn't want to involve the police because Alex was just a kid. But many nights later, I woke up to knocking at my window. I knew it was Alex, even though my blinds were closed. The knocking went on for 5 minutes, and I even heard him try to open the window. I was scared and my heart was racing. Eventually, the knocking stopped. I told my parents, but they told me to just ignore it. They probably didn't think it was a big deal since Alex was just a kid. A few days later, Dan, another friend, and I were biking down the block when we passed Alex's house. I saw him run to the window and watch us as we passed. I told my friends about Alex and they thought it was funny. One of them made a comment about how Alex sounds like someone who would live in a gross house. That night, I woke up to the sound of my window shattering. I screamed as I saw Alex climbing through the window, even though my blinds were closed. I ran to my parents' room and woke them up. By the time I got there, Alex was already outside. My dad chased him all the way back to his house, but Alex made it inside before my dad could catch up. My dad pounded on the door until Alex's parents opened it, and he must have said something convincing because they agreed to pay for the broken window if my dad didn't involve the police. Alex's parents paid to fix the window, and I never heard from him again. I saw him a few times in front of his house over the next couple of years when I was driving by, but that was it. Thankfully, his family eventually moved away. I think Alex might have wanted to hurt me, maybe even kill me, because I didn't want to be his friend, and I was hanging out with other kids instead. What else would explain him breaking my window and climbing in? It's scary to think about what kind of person Alex might have become.